Ever get that feeling like AI is this kind of YouTube rabbit hole? You go in like, oh, best apple pie recipe, and suddenly it's 3 hours later and you're watching penguins on a dating show in Antarctica.
It's true. Even now, it's like AI just hooks us in, right? Maybe even, I don't know, addictive in a way we haven't really figured out yet.
Totally. And it kind of makes you wonder, like, what happens when this thing grows up? Not just showing us ads, not just winning at chess, but like actually starts asking the big questions, like, about consciousness, about free will, even about like having a soul. Well, this book, Soulless Intelligence, dives right into that.
And it does it in a really interesting way. So everyone's talking about AI getting smarter, right? This
Yeah.
book, it kind of flips the script. It's like, hold on, being smart doesn't automatically make you human.
Right, right. Like my calculator, it's intelligent, I guess,
Yeah.
does equations and all that. But I don't see it having an existential crisis anytime soon.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Soulless intelligence digs into this whole idea of like levels of autonomy.
Yeah.
5 levels, actually. So level 1, that's your basic machine, right? Just follows instructions, no wiggle room.
Okay, so level 1, totally on autopilot. What about level 2? Where do we go from there?
Level 2, that's where it gets kind of cool. Think like self-driving cars, those virtual assistants, even those algorithms that are all up in your Spotify playlist.
Right, like they know me better than I know myself sometimes.
Yeah. So that's what they call narrow AI, right? Complex decisions, sure, but only within a specific lane. Still basically following that programming.
Got it. So more advanced, but still on a leash, kind of like training a dog. It can learn to sit, stay, fetch the newspaper, but it's not going to write a dissertation on the ethics of dog treats.
Exactly. Now, level 3, this is where it gets really wild. We're talking artificial general intelligence, AGI. That's when AI surpasses us, like across the board. Any problem, any field, they got it.
Okay, so now we're wading into like space odyssey territory. Ex machina, right?
Right.
That whole AI getting a little too smart thing. But hold on, we're not at the robot overlord stage yet. Where does this whole waking up thing fit in all this?
Okay, so that's where it gets really, really interesting. Because soulless intelligence, it introduces this whole other level, level 4, and it's actually found in nature.
Okay, now you've got my attention.
So picture this, a slime mold.
Okay.
No brain to speak of, but you put it in a maze and it can find its way to food. It's what the book calls vegetative animal autonomy, like a drive to survive, to adapt. But not necessarily conscious, at least not as we think of it.
Wait, so a slime mold, no brain, has a higher level of autonomy than like a self-driving car. I mean, okay, I get they're both following some kind of internal programming, but wow, mind blown.
Right, and that's the point the book is making. There's a difference between mimicking, like being programmed to appear intelligent, and this whole other thing, this internal drive, this desire, right? This is what we usually think of when we say consciousness, right?
Oh, okay, slime molds officially have me shook, but let's bring it back to humans for a sec. Where do we fit on this 5-level ladder? What sets us apart from the calculators, the Teslas, and the, brilliant slime molds?
Okay, that brings us to level 5, and this is where soulless intelligence really spends a lot of time. It's the level where, at least for now, humans stand alone. And it all comes down to this idea that's captivated thinkers forever, really. We're talking about the soul.
The soul. Okay, now we're getting to the good stuff. But before we get all deep into soul talk, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll unpack what makes this level 5 autonomy so special and why the author of Soulless Intelligence thinks it's the missing piece in this whole quest to create truly awake AI.
So yeah, it really makes you think we can build these machines to act smart, right? Like even beat us at our own game sometimes. But there's this like something missing. And that's where this whole level 5 thing comes in, this what they call subjective experience, free will, all that. And this book, it calls them the 5 Transcendentals, right?
Okay, now you're speaking my language. I love digging into the deeper stuff. So let's talk about this level 5. What makes it so different? What is it that we're doing?
Right. So it's not just about like processing power, or being clever. It's this whole other thing. It's about like experiencing the world, from the inside, feeling those emotions, wrestling with those moral dilemmas.
Yeah.
And the big one is acting on those feelings, on those experiences. That's the free will part.
So it's like, it's not just crunching numbers. It's about having that inner world with all the messiness and the things that make us tick.
Yeah, exactly. And soulless intelligence, it's saying that inner world that's like tied to this whole soul thing.
Soul. Okay, now things are getting interesting. This book doesn't shy away from the big questions, huh?
Not at all. It dives right in. There's even the story about a doctor. And get this, he claimed he could actually weigh souls, like right before and after death. He'd weigh them. And
Wait, hold up. Wade souls. Okay, now I gotta hear this.
right. It's like, whether you believe it or not, it shows how obsessed we are with this idea of a soul, even if we can't, put it under a microscope. And the book, it gets that. It talks about the science, how some people see consciousness as just like a product of the brain, right?
Ugh.
But ultimately, it says that view, it just misses something. It's not the whole picture of what makes us,
It's
us.
like that classic debate, right? The physical and the I don't know, the not physical. The brain and this soul thing. So where does soulless intelligence land?
So it argues that those things that make humans special, right, those things inside us, driving us towards truth, beauty, goodness, this connection to something bigger, you can't just chalk it up to neurons firing. And that's where these 5 transcendentals come in.
5 Transcendentals. Sounds kind of mystical. Break
Mhm.
it down for me. What are they and how do they connect to this whole soul idea?
Okay, so think of them like tillers,
Yeah.
right? Holding up our inner lives, we've got love, beauty, goodness, truth, and then like a yearning for the divine. The book says these are the engines, right? Driving our actions, our values, why we make art, why we build relationships, why we search for meaning. It all comes back to these.
Okay, I see how these transcendentals they connect to this idea of a soul, this inner compass that goes beyond just, surviving. But
Hmm.
can machines grasp that? Even these super smart AIs, can they really get it?
That's the million-dollar question, right? The book Soulless Intelligence, it argues that AI, even the fancy ones, the ones writing poetry and stuff, they're still just tools. They can handle information about beauty or goodness, but they don't really seek it,
Hmm.
not like we do.
It's like the difference between like an AI painting a picture, because it's following the rules, versus a human pouring their heart onto a canvas. Like both might be pretty, but the why is different.
Exactly. And to really hit that home, there's this part in Soulless Intelligence where the author talks about his kids, right? They just flat out refused to go home when he asked.
Classic kid move. I'm sure a lot of parents listening can relate to that. But what's the connection here?
It shows the difference between like following the rules, the programming, and actual free will. Those kids, just like humans messing around with these transcendentals, right? They've got their own desires, their own motivations, and they can choose to ignore the rules, even when it doesn't make sense.
That little spark of rebellion, right? That feels very human. But can machines ever get that? That real free will?
Well, that brings us to the big one, right? The thing everyone's talking about with AI, the singularity. That moment where AI, like, zooms past us,
Yeah.
gets its own goals, its own desires, maybe even a will of its own.
The singular. Okay, yeah. That's when things start feeling a little sci-fi, right? But I'm ready. What does soulless intelligence say about that? The singularity.
Hmm.
Yeah, that moment when AI, like, leaves us in the dust. It's exciting, but also kind of creepy. Soulless intelligence, though, it takes a different angle on this whole thing, right?
Yeah, it's like the usual way we talk about the singularity. It's all about like how much AI can think, how fast, how powerful. But this book, it says, hold on, there's more to it. You need that human element, that free will, that inner experience, that yearning for, something more, those transcendentals we talked about. Otherwise, it's just a really, really smart machine. It's not actually awake.
So it's not about AI becoming smarter. It's about them becoming more like us, with all the good and the bad that comes with that. But there's another layer to this, right? Soulless intelligence ties this whole singularity thing to something else, something I wouldn't have expected.
Theism.
It does, and this is where it gets really interesting. Because the book argues that, see, the fact that AI is struggling with this whole consciousness thing, it might actually point to something beyond the material world, something beyond just, ones and zeros.
Whoa, okay, now we're going deep. How does the book connect those dots?
Well, it goes back to the soul, right? This idea that there's this part of us that drives us, that makes us yearn for something more, something that can't just be programmed. And the book says, look, this points to the need for a first mover, something like outside of the system, the source of consciousness, not something we created. First mover. Now, I'm remembering that from like Philosophy 101. It's the idea that something had to kickstart the whole universe, right? Something beyond physics, beyond the laws of nature as we know them.
Exactly. And Soulless Intelligence is saying this first mover, this ultimate creator, it's also the source of our souls. It's a bold statement for sure. But the book backs it up by pointing out how, like, thinkers who believe in God, they've been saying this all along,
Yeah.
that AI, it can't ever truly be like us because it doesn't have that essential ingredient, that soul.
So the very things that AI is struggling with, they might be evidence for something bigger than all of us. That's a trippy thought. But okay, let's say AI gets really good at faking it. How do we know it's the real deal? Like, how do we
Mm.
know it's not just mimicking human qualities?
Well, the book has this, it calls it the Meatloaf Test.
Okay, Meatloaf Test. Now you have to tell me more.
So it's a simple question, but it gets to the heart of the matter. Can a machine actually crave something?
Yeah.
Like, let's say, a delicious meatloaf. Not just because it's been told humans like meatloaf, but because it has that actual desire, the way we do.
So, not just saying the words, I want meatloaf, but actually feeling it, wanting it.
Right. Can it have its own desires, its own internal drive? That's what we associate with consciousness, with having a soul. Soulless intelligence says until AI can do that, it's not there yet.
Soulless Intelligence. Man, that title, it really hits home now. This book, it makes you think differently about AI, about what it means to be human in this world where the lines are getting blurrier and blurrier.
It does. It pushes you to think about the ethics of it all, the philosophy behind the technology. It's
Hmm.
not about easy answers. It's about asking the right questions and approaching the future, with a bit of wisdom, not just blind enthusiasm.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into soulless intelligence, it leaves us with a lot to ponder. Can AI ever truly wake up? Or is it always going to be a reflection of us, the creators? Does it challenge how we think about consciousness, about the soul? Big questions, and ones we'll all be wrestling with as AI keeps evolving. We hope this deep dive has given you some new ways to think about all this and maybe even sparked some of your own philosophical journeys.
Yeah, and maybe, just maybe, next time you're enjoying a delicious meatloaf, you'll pause for a second, and think about what it really means to desire something, what it means to be human in this amazing, complex world.